Where'd they go? Oh, I found them. They're right here. Ah! Yep.
Oh, okay. Good morning. Good morning, Timothy. I missed that one last bit or beat. Okay. Anyway, and it means that everybody else did. Good morning to the people who are watching us this morning on July the 13th. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One, episode 231. And we're going to talk about the Japanese politics, the economy, the elections that are coming this month, actually, the upper house elections. And I believe that there will be some mention of the tariff talks between the United States and Japan, and maybe some other things. Timothy.
Thank you, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Today is July 13th, 2025. Once again, this is, as Maya said, episode 231, 4.5+ years every Sunday to report to you Japan hands. And thank you very much for joining us. The yen closed out at 147.43 to the dollar on Friday. That is about a 2% weakening from last week. And once again, last week, I apologize for that the numbers were a little bit wrong. I apologize for that, but we'll make it up to you by being snappier and more accurate and more pithy in these presentations. The Prime Minister was in Malaysia. There was a regional conference in Kuala Lumpur. Everybody in the region was there. Russia was there. China was there. Japan was there. A lot of the regional players and a lot of things were accomplished in that very brief meeting. But at the same time, the Prime Minister is fighting for his political life. The election is next Sunday, so we've got one more week of campaigning, and it is getting very hot, and I imagine we'll get into it in the Q&A. Who will be the next Prime Minister is an issue that we'll go into today and probably develop a little bit more richly with your inquiry and questions that you pose to Maya, and then she will feed them to me. The Emperor was in Mongolia, the first time for the Emperor and the Empress to go to Mongolia. Although the Mongolian leader has been to Japan a couple of times, but it's very rare. The history of Mongolia and Japan at the end of the war was really fraught with a lot of pain and despair and suffering. And so it's a wound that has not quite healed very much, but the Emperor went there to pay his respects, and I'd like to get into that a little bit to give you a little bit of insight into what's going on. We're approaching the 80th anniversary of the end of the Pacific War, and there are a lot of things that are building up to that. So the Prime Minister, Mr. Ishiba, is preparing his statements to be made on not the anniversary, I guess it's the anniversary, on the memorial of the end of the war, and hoping that he will still be Prime Minister to give those remarks. Foreign tourism is increasing here in Japan. It does cause some problems, but once again, it does provide some necessary currency into the economy here, which needs it very badly. Mount Fuji opened up this week for climbing. The expo in Japan is on fire, as you would expect. We're almost halfway through. And then I would like to talk a little bit, the issue has come up a couple of times, Maya, about inheritance in Japan and how that impacts not just the Japanese, but how it impacts foreigners in particular. I'd like to get into that just a little bit at the end of the briefing. So back to you, Maya.
Okay, thank you, Timothy. And if you're watching us now, or you're going to watch us later today or during the week, and if you haven't subscribed to the channels we are on, please do that and let us know that you have been there. You can hit like, follow, subscribe, or you can leave a comment with your thoughts and questions so that we can address them next time. Or if you do that during this live stream, we'll do this today. So thank you very much again. And Timothy, this is Timothy Langley. You have already met him somewhere I believe, in Tokyo. If you are in Tokyo, or if you have been online, and he has been online much longer than most of the people we know. So he is the CEO of Langley Square, the longest standing and most successful government affairs and public relations agency here in Japan and in Tokyo. So if you have any issues, concerning government permits, market entry, please do not hesitate to reach out to him and talk with him and see how his company, his team can be of help to you. So, Timothy, once again, back to the briefing.
Thank you, Maya. I just saw your daughter escape from behind you.
Yes,
You saw that she was there. That's very
I did.
funny. It reminds me of what happened in COVID with that newspaper report, or the television reporter.
Right, yes.
So, Maya, I am reporting today from Miura Peninsula, the tip of the Miura Peninsula, the Yokohama Peninsula. There's a port there called Misaki. And Miura was the fief that was given to John Adams as when he became a samurai in the book that was largely fictional but based on true events of Anjin-san, Anjin Miura. Anjin was his trade, and Miura was the fief that was given to him by Tokugawa. So that's where I sailed into today. I'm on the tied up to the dock now. There might be a little bit of confusion because a lot of people are going to be getting into this tourism boat. They haven't gathered yet, but they're going to be very curious about what's going on. This guy that's standing in a boat talking to himself. So that will generate a little bit of laughter. But thank you very much for everybody that's joining. Japan Hands from all over the world join us, and we really appreciate it. We do things besides just be funny and give you insight and understanding what's going on in Japan. If you do have issues in Japan, political, business, there's lots of things. I mean, coming to Japan is nothing if not getting into trouble and solving those problems and, eventually becoming hopefully successful. And we can help you do that. So if you've got some issues, please give us a call, including inheritance, which we're going to talk about at the end of the program. But as I said, the yen closed out 2% weaker than it started last week. So this indicates, and the Bank of Japan will have their monthly meeting at the end of this month. Last month, it was right in the middle of the month. So we got a little bit more insight. I guess it'll be the 30th and the 31st, the last 2 days of this month. The Bank of Japan always meets once a month on a day, 2 days, to tell people what's going on. And one of the things that they must report to the public is what interventions they've had in propping up the yen. And there is some concern going on that the yen has been stable for artificial purposes. It should be perhaps a little bit more volatile given the geopolitical and the situation in the United States and the currency that's going on there, and the economy, the Trump economy. So we're waiting for that. That'll be in 2 weeks' time. But before that, we've got the election, which is Sunday. So the yen is acting somewhat cautiously. Typically, the yen is a safe haven in times of geopolitical turmoil. Can you turn off your mic, Maya?
Yes.
I can hear your daughter still scrambling around there. The United States dollar and the yen are also safe havens. And so when geopolitics becomes a little bit volatile, it's important to watch what the yen is doing. So this diminution of the yen, the value of the yen weakening just a little bit within a range, it's not unusual. It fluctuates daily, in fact, but from week to week for it to weaken 2% is something just to keep your eye on. The Bank of Japan will be watching that closely and reporting to you. The Prime Minister was in Malaysia. They had a regional meeting of all of the countries that are involved in trade and diplomacy. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, did attend. He was supposed to be in Japan last week, and as a part of the tour of the region, he's going to visit 5 or 6 nations. Because of what was going on in the White House with the Middle East negotiations, he decided to stay in Washington, D.C., and he crossed off Korea, he crossed off Japan on his itinerary, but then he left as usual. And the Prime Minister did have a little bit of a chance to talk with him. It wasn't a formal sit-down meeting. It wasn't 90 minutes. He did spend, I think, 30 minutes with the prime minister, but he spent almost 90 minutes with Russia. And at the same time that this was happening, so there are developments going on there. He's lining things up. He is a very articulate and powerful, I think, Secretary of State. He will, I think, go down as a great Secretary of State. He is really convincing. But there's movement going on with Russia and Ukraine, Japan's participation there, but mostly it's driven by the United States, obviously. And also with China, there's been some really interesting developments on the plus side and on the negative side as it impacts not just Japan trade with China and kind of defensive action with regard to the Trump tariffs, but also something promoting Mr. Ishiba as being somewhat suave and cohesive to China and saying some of the things that resonate with China at a time when he needs a little bit of a boost for these elections. Only 6 more days left. Elections stop on Saturday. And you might remember 2 years ago, and we just passed the anniversary of the assassination of Shinzo Abe. That was on a Saturday, the last day of the election campaign, and he was assassinated on that day. So Saturday is a big day. The sound trucks, the campaign trucks get really loud. There's a lot of clashes, and with the real fight that's going on now in Japanese politics, it is just astounding. Interesting, great that we have this program. When Maya and I started it 4.5 years ago, we didn't think that there would be enough to talk about every week. But boy, that has proved wrong. Every single week, we've got something that's going on that's important to you and to your business and to U.S.-Japan relations and Japan relations overall. So we greatly appreciate you tuning in with us. So the elections, there's a lot going on in the newspapers. There's a lot of great commentary. Michael Chuchek at Temple University is writing very deeply about Sanseito, the new political party that is, it ran a lot of people in the Tokyo elections, and it did relatively well, but it ran candidates in all of the districts. Nobody else did that. The LDP didn't do that. The LDP has some districts that it's a little bit squishy on, so it will maybe support a candidate there, or maybe it will double down. But there are some election districts in Tokyo, in the Tokyo wards, that it's just given up. It's not going to win no matter what. They've just either Ishin or Tomin first, or maybe they've just negotiated with the other parties. I'm going to give you this district, you give me this one so that I can win it. So there's a lot of that. In the current one, in the current election for 125 seats in the upper house, they are really making noise and attracting a lot of attention and a lot of eyeballs, and actually attracting a lot of people, which is a little bit worrying, because I think people have, and you sense it too, that people have tired of the LDP. We had the scandal with putting the money in the pocket from the Benkyokai, and then the disbanding of the factions, and then all of this other stuff that's going on. Mr. Ishiba giving, some money to his lower house candidates who had won. He gave them a dinner at his residence, and he gave them gifts, vouchers, in fact. Not totally illegal, but it did cause a little bit of concern. So there's always, some mud you can throw at the LDP, and Bunshun never misses an opportunity to do that. So there's been some noise now about some LDP members being a little bit squeaky on their finances. And in fact, there was an LDP committee chair who had to resign this week. The Diet is in session, but to have a committee chair resign because of something he uttered, something he said that might upset people, and then he resigned to take blame for that and to show contrition, to kill that issue, to make sure that it didn't really kind of explode into something deeper. So it's a very, very delicate time. And the real issue here is, so we're going to have elections. Who knows how it's going to happen? But in any event, the lower house is already, the LDP does not dominate the lower house as it once did forever. And now it's 13 votes short. So how does it cover that up? However, it ends up in the upper house. In the upper house, they could afford to lose more than 16 votes of the 125 that are up. 120, they can lose 16 seats and still be sitting okay. A lot of that depends on how Komeito does, and Komeito is not doing very well these days. The Japanese Communist Party is not doing so well these days, and for the same reasons, the people who were true die-hard voters for Komeito and also for the Japan Communist Party are typically older, well-educated individuals, and their numbers, as we all know, are decreasing. So it's a bit of a gamble there, and the LDP depends on the Komeito vote. So the option comes up, maybe the LDP is going to form a coalition with who would be the best. It's not going to be the Constitutional Democratic Party. It's the largest opposition party, headed by Mr. Noda, who was previously prime minister. So there's going to be maybe cooperation on an issue by issue basis, but it's not a coalition. Maybe Ishin, but Ishin is not really doing very well these days if you're following the polls. Maybe the Democratic Party for the People, led by Mr. Tamaki. In a poll, Mainichi did a poll this last week on a broad range of issues. It's too deep for me to get into it, but if you follow Tobias Harris, Tobias published a great piece just this last week that segmented what the poll said and how Japanese people typically feel. And the reason why this is important, why polls are important, is because Japanese politicians follow the polls. They listen to what the polls tell them, because politics is not done otherwise. I mean, they listen to their voters, they listen to their constituents, as everybody does, but the way policy moves, the way issues are decided, there's very little talk about, the GDP, Japan's terrible GDP. 125% of the debt is represented by, 125% times the GDP is in debt. So no other G7 country, nobody in the G20, in fact, has a debt to GDP ratio like that. Nobody's talking about that in this election. It is mostly about the consumption tax. It's about employment. It's about the tariffs, the economy, and a little bit on the fringe about foreigners and about foreign employment and foreigners coming in. So San Seito is kind of hooked on that. There are a couple of the smaller parties who have also begun to criticize the number and the capacity of foreigners that are coming in. But I think any way you cut it, the Japanese economy is reliant on these foreign migrant workers, and they're not all white foreigners from Australia and Britain and the United States. That's a misconception. That most of the foreigners that are coming in, the migrants that are coming in looking for work, are from Southeast Asia, China, South Korea, Malaysia, a lot from India, Pakistan. And if you've ever visited the immigration office out in Shinagawa, you notice that. I mean, every day it's just flooded with people extending their visa or applying for their visa or trying to stay in. The LDP did say, though, that we're going to stick tight on immigration policy. We're not going to let people into the country who don't deserve here. A very different philosophy than a lot of countries, as we all are very aware of, in Italy, Spain, Britain, France. There's a lot going on there, but the Japanese will have none of that. So there's a little bit of an undercurrent here. Some read a little bit negativity into it, so it's very important to be careful here. Some of it is deserved, and some of it is just xenophobic. And this, in the current situation where the economy has been down, the economy has continued to be down, and no matter what they do with the yen, people's lives don't get better. They keep increasing their salaries, and the inflation just eats it up. So in fact, the average wage has decreased in purchasing power, even though it's increased in monetary value. So it's a very uncomfortable situation for the LDP. As you remember, the prime minister tried to placate the voters by giving Nimaen 20,000 yen to every adult in the entire nation. I'm going to give you, it's less than $200. I'm giving it to you just before the election. It has nothing to do with the elections, of course, but I'm just doing it because I know the economy is bad. And the opposition parties really homed in on that, and they said, you're giving you're attempting to bribe the population. Nobody buys it, and $170. What does that do? That doesn't help anybody, even though it's a wife and a husband, and maybe it's $350. Give me a break. What you should do, Mr. Prime Minister, is you should reduce the consumption tax. So the opposition parties are all focused on the consumption tax, and the LDP is not. The LDP is, in their manifesto, in their pronouncements, is saying we need to maintain the consumption tax at 10% and 8% for foodstuffs because it's fiscally irresponsible to do anything different. The opposition party is saying you need to bolster the economy. You need to jack it a little bit. And so depending on what political party it is in opposition, they have different recipes for how to address that. So that's one of the distinguishing features that you'll see if you're following this very closely. So the issue really becomes, what is the likelihood that the LDP is also going to lose in the upper house? And then it's in a lame duck in the upper house, it's a lame duck in the lower house. What does it do about that? Does it bring in Mr. Tamaki's party? It does have enough votes to cover both the upper house and the lower house. And then if it was a coalition, if it was truly a coalition, and you have to do what we say to get these legislative initiatives passed through and the bills passed into the Diet to become law in the next fiscal year, it requires, a bit of a big carrot. And Mr. Tamaki is no pushover. I think the reason why the LDP and Komeito have not embraced Mr. Tamaki and the Democratic Party for the People is because he's such a tough negotiator. He did say at one point, I would join the coalition if they asked me to be prime minister. And that is a carrot that, that's how the opposition, Mr. Moriyama and Mr. Noda also kind of took over, is, this balancing act. And it worked for a little bit, but I think the Japanese population is just not ready for an opposition party to retake political power. They want the LDP to stay in place, and the polls play that out, but there is a frustration that's going on. So the key feature here in this election next Sunday, does the LDP retain 50 between the LDP and Komeito? Do they retain 50 seats? So watch that on Sunday night. And actually, we'll be meeting once again. It probably won't be in Miura Peninsula. I will definitely be someplace else. Next week is a 3-day weekend, by the way. Marine Day is on Monday. So that allows me to expand my range a little bit. So who knows where I'll be? Maybe Shimoda. But I'm going to concentrate on the Wi-Fi, Maya, and making sure that I have enough air coming on me so that I don't melt in front of the cameras. But in any event, if they don't get the 50, now there's a new ball game, and the new ball game is in two different ways. How do they overcome the deficit that they have in the upper house? But more importantly, if they're going to do that, the real gem is the lower house, because the lower house basically controls how legislation goes forward. And I think the LDP is just sick of it. It's up to here with having to negotiate with the various parties about getting legislation done. It's a very difficult task. So we'll be waiting for that. The second thing to focus on is who's going to be prime minister. There are a couple of theories out that says Prime Minister Ishiba should remain in his position. Number one, because it's going to be a bit of a regrouping, and it's going to be very difficult for the LDP to continue forward. Nobody really wants to rebuild the LDP. That's going to be a difficult job. Let's let Mr. Ishiba do it, because it's his fault anyway. He's lost basically 3 elections in his term of office. He's a miserable prime minister. He doesn't know what he's doing, but I don't want to be around to clean up his mess. Let him do it for a little bit, and then maybe, he's still got 3 years left in his tenure, and the lower house also has 3.5 years left before there's a formal election of them. So I don't think it'll last that long. The other more likely scenario is that the LDP decides that, thank you very much for taking us this far, Mr. Prime Minister. It's time for somebody else to step in. What would happen there is there's a discussion about the Prime Minister resigning. It's not really a fight. It's a backroom kind of discussion. He agrees one way or the other to resign, and then as LDP president. He would resign as the LDP president, and the LDP would elect a new president. And once that president is elected, then he would resign as prime minister. And then the Diet, the upper house and the lower house, votes for the prime minister, the new prime minister. And the candidates for prime minister come from the various parties, and every party promotes its own top dog. So Mr. Maehara from Ishin would be their candidate for prime minister. Mr. Noda obviously would be the candidate for the Constitutional Democratic Party. The communists would support their leader. Komeito would be quiet and let the LDP kind of carry the day. But however you look at it, of all the parties, the LDP is the largest one. So it's just a plurality. Who is going to have the most number of votes? And that'll be the LDP. So whoever is the LDP president would thereby become prime minister, but they need to go through that process. And the calculus here is, if they do that, if the LDP votes for another president, remember we did this almost a year ago, and we had 9 candidates for prime minister. And these individuals who were candidates are still in the environment. They still very much want to have a leadership role. Some of them do. Mr. Koizumi was a candidate. He's Minister of State. Konotaro, a Minister of State. Some of them are not, and they're sitting in the wings. They're waiting for the opportunity to reassert themselves. They're not going to go away. They will definitely go in. But I think the die is already cast. There's only a couple of people who could really, in the current state of affairs, become prime minister in an encouraging way, and that's probably a comeback of Mr. Kishida. Mr. Kishida has already been prime minister. He gave it up. He resigned. He wasn't really forced out. He decided it was time for him to move on, and then they had the election that we've just been through a year ago, where Mr. Ishibo wasn't the top choice. Sanai Takaichi was the top choice, and then they went to the runoff, and he beat her and became prime minister. But there are a lot of other candidates too. In this next round, that's going to be a pretty dicey thing. I think it's either Mr. Kishida or Mr. Hayashi. Mr. Hayashi would make a great prime minister. His English is excellent. He's a great guitar player, but he's also just a great individual. He's been in the parliament, and his father was in the parliament. His father was a real firebrand, in fact. And he was in the upper house. His career started in the upper house, and he switched from the upper house into the lower house in the last election so that he could be in the lower house. The prime minister always comes from the lower house. That was his strategy. That was the strategy of Nakayama Taro, the fellow who hired me out of Japanese law school, and he was in the upper house. He also switched to the lower house to become prime minister. He didn't quite make it. He became foreign minister instead, but that is the step. Mr. Sekko also was in the upper house, and he changed into the lower house, also with his eyes on becoming prime minister at some point in time. But of the gang of 5 that was controlling Seiwakai, the Abe faction, he was in that group. So it's hard to kind of suggest that at any reasonable time he's going to be prime minister or a candidate for prime minister. But getting back to Mr. Kishida, Mr. Hayashi, Kobayashi, all of these guys, I think that's what's coming up in the near term, and it's something to look forward to. We'll continue to watch it with you. The emperor was in Mongolia. Switching gears here. The emperor was in Mongolia 2 weeks ago. He was in Okinawa. These are the kinds of setup to the end of the war memorial that is in August. August is Obon, the season. There are 3-day weekends in August. There's one this month, and there's 3 of them in August, and one of them is Obon. Obon is the return of the dead back to Japan. So there's a lot of memorialization going on in Yasukuni Jinja, as you might be following, but also the fact that it's 80 years since the end of the war. So there's a lot going on there. China is watching very closely. They are coaching and cajoling the prime minister through the foreign ministry, what the prime minister should be saying and what the tone of his remarks should be. He should acknowledge what Japan did to China and all of the things it did in Southeast Asia. And the Japanese, of course, are somewhat reluctant to do that. Okinawa was big. There was 200,000 deaths there. The let me see. There was of the Americans who fought there, 12,000, 12,500 deaths, more than 49, almost 50,000 casualties. That's the largest number of battlefield deaths, and the battle was only 90 days. And that was the largest number of deaths of any Pacific battle, and one of the biggest battles in recent history. But also for Japan, Japan shipped maybe 11,000, no, 110,000 soldiers, all from all over Japan. They picked them up, they sent them there in different regiments. Maybe 6 months before the Battle of Okinawa began, almost all of these soldiers perished. Probably less than 8% of them survived. But the real kicker here is the Okinawan civilians. So when the soldiers came in, they conscripted all of the villagers. Everybody was basically a soldier. The girls were nurses. The boys were practicing with bayonets and pointed spears and digging tunnels and things like that. 1/3 of the Okinawan population was killed as a consequence of that. So the fact that the emperor went there to visit the peace memorial is significant, and it's something that people need to remember. With regard to Mongolia, you might not remember this, but as the war was ending, Okinawa fell, and as soon as the United States dropped the first atomic bomb, Russia invaded Manchuria. And then it was moving into the northern territories. It invaded the northern territories, and it prepared to invade Hokkaido. So during that period of time, the United States said, look, we have more than just this bomb here. I mean, we can have several bombs delivered to your doorstep too. And it stopped the invasion of Hokkaido. But the Northern Territories issue has still remained a bone of contention between Russia and Japan. And to this day, they have not signed a peace treaty. So a lot of people don't realize that 80 years you haven't signed a peace treaty. Does that mean there are hostilities? It doesn't necessarily mean there are hostilities, but when you sign a peace treaty, there are certain conventions and certain rules and regulations that you both commit to. They haven't gone through that process. There has been repatriation of soldiers. But the important thing about Mongolia is all of the soldiers who were, when the war ended, now everybody in South Korea, North Korea, Manchuria, China, Mongolia, because they were, I mean, Japan had been there for 30 years doing trade and building railroads and mining and changing the culture of these countries that it had occupied. So when the war ended, they couldn't come back to Japan. The ships were not carrying them out. And about 500,000 soldiers were transported to Mongolia, where they did forced labor. And a huge number of them, more than 15% of them, died while in captivity. And I think that's one of the things that has prevented the imperial family from visiting Mongolia. But the fact that the emperor and the empress did it this time is a big deal. And I think they should be commended for breaking that at a time when the Diet is in such turmoil that the emperor is taking a different leaf and pursuing a different kind of tenor of geopolitics and diplomacy. I think it's something that we all should take heed of. But in any event, we're moving into April, Obon, the end of the Pacific War. The end of the Pacific War was, let me see, that was August 6th was the first bomb on Hiroshima. The second bomb was 3 days later in Nagasaki. And that is the day that Russia decided, or the Soviet Union decided to invade Manchuria. And also, they were already well ahead of Sakhalin and the Northern Territories. And then on the 15th, the emperor finally went on the radio and said that he was going to surrender and that the war had not gone altogether well for Japan, as you might recall. So I think probably the prime minister will be making a speech on the 15th, and that will be a day of real solemnity for Japan. And so if you're living here, or even if you're not, keep your eye out for what's going to go on during that time. The other thing that happened is Mr. Rubio, Secretary of State of the United States, was supposed to be in Japan. He didn't come, but he went to Malaysia, and the Prime Minister did have an opportunity to speak to him, but not very deeply. And I think the United States has moved on with regard to Japan. They've implemented the 25% tariffs. They're through negotiating. They're sick of it. Mr. Akiyama has not been successful in convincing the United States that the tariffs don't make sense. And the Prime Minister has said, well, if because the letters went out on, I think, Tuesday to many countries, Brazil, Canada. Canada got 35%, Brazil got 50%. And there's a lot of derision that is being generated by that. And the Prime Minister kind of got his back straight and said, we're going to figure out a way to deal with this, and not necessarily succumbing to the being pushed around by the United States. And China, of course, is going, yeah, that's right. So after 30 years of not importing any beef from Japan, the Chinese have relinquished that, and now they're importing beef from Japan. I don't think it's 35 years. I think it's 25 years because of the bovine epidemic that hit Japan. And for a lot of reasons, and maybe it was just an excuse, they cut off importation of beef. And then during the triple disaster, they cut off the importation of fruits and vegetables, especially from the Fukushima and the surrounding prefectures there, the 5 prefectures there, complete ban on that. And then they banned all seafood coming in. So little by little, these restrictions have been released, and China is now getting to be a little bit chummy with Japan. And that's why this pronouncement that the Prime Minister, whoever the Prime Minister will be, on August 16th, the pronouncement that he's going to talk about what happened with the Pacific War and what atonement Japan has made, and how we're a different universe at this point as a consequence of many things. And it will be a very important policy speech, but they're trying to make sure that the right tone is set there. And if you want to be friendly with China, and the United States is giving you a hard time and unfairly taxing you on the tariffs for your products, there are other markets that you can address. And in fact, I think Japan, Canada, Brazil, many of these countries that are under the gun with the tariffs are actually actively considering this. So the President of the United States has said, if there's a retaliation, then we're going to double down. And it's not necessarily retaliation by forming other routes, other supply chains for your products. But it's really a challenge. It is the topic of conversation among the candidates in the election now. And it's not ended. I mean, the letters went out. August 1st is the date that the tariffs go into effect. So throughout this week, you'll hear all of the candidates talking about what their position is, how the Prime Minister should stand up to Mr. Trump. He should be stronger. He's weak. He's not espousing the Japanese tradition and being pushed around. So he's under attack there too for failing to reach some sort of a negotiated settlement. So there'll be a lot of heat and a lot of discussion this next week. Foreign tourists continue to flood into Japan. April, the last date or the last month that we have figures, was just astounding. It was a record. 3.91 million foreigners visited Japan. That's more than the number of foreigners who actually live in Japan. The number of tourists that came in throughout that month is greater than the number of foreigners who live and work in Japan. It's a 28% increase year on year from April of last year. So that's pretty good. And the great thing about this is that over the year, if we calculate year on year to April, that's 40 million people who have visited Japan in that 12-month period. More importantly, that's more than 10 trillion yen of investment that's come in. That's why tourism is so important, is because although there's a little bit of weight to the infrastructure, to the hotels and the traffic and stuff like that, it's not really that heavy. It is mostly people coming in with suitcases and leaving their money here after being here for 5 or 10 days and then leaving. And now with the opening of Mount Fuji opened on Tuesday, I believe. You have to pay 4,000 yen to climb. It used to be free. I think this is maybe the first year. Maybe they began to charge people last year, depending on the route that you took. But all routes now are very much charged, and they observe what you're carrying in your backpack and what kind of shoes you have, and do you have rain gear, and are you carrying this? And so the days of foreigners getting off the airplane and partying in Roppongi and then getting on a bus to climb Mount Fuji in flip-flops, that is behind us. You're not going to see that on television anymore. They're moving into a much more sophisticated way of dealing with climbing this. Of course, it's a sacred mountain, so you're not supposed to drop trash. You're not supposed to yell and scream. You're not supposed to have drones there. So it is highly regulated, but it's the climbing season has begun if you're interested. The expo continues nonstop. Japan had their day last week, and they did a fantastic showcase. The prime minister actually went to observe that too. The next day it was China. I think on Friday it was China's turn, and China sent their number 3 to observe China Day in the expo. And while he was there, he was able to meet with Mr. Moriyama, who is the Secretary General of the LDP, a very powerful person. He is the person that convinced the prime ministers to hold that snap election. He's the right-hand man of the prime minister, and he is a very close confidant. I wouldn't say confidant. He's very closely aligned with China. He is a China friend. There is a group of politicians within the LDP that are strongly related to China issues, and he's one of them. And he met with the number 3, and they, I think they signed the bill, or they signed off on the beef imports, but also on other issues as well. And I think there's a little bit of slapping on the back. You know, that Trump tariff 20, that's so unfair. We would never do that to you. So there's much more going on there. So the final issue I'd like to talk about is inheritance. That has come up as an issue on this program a couple of times. So when you die as a foreigner in Japan, how does the Japanese authorities tax you? How do they get your money in inheritance? If you're American or Brazilian or Chinese or whatever, they have their own local laws for a national who dies, whether they die in their home state or they die in a foreign state. Taxes typically attach at the time of death for inheritance, and everybody has their own regime. Japan's is really a tough one for Japanese, but also for foreigners as well. And it has a long reach, so it can grab your global assets. If you've been living in Japan for a certain number of years, past 5 years, and you've been here for a certain period of time, and you leave Japan, if you die within 10 years after leaving Japan, the tax authorities can still reach out and grab part of your global assets. And so it's an issue that comes up all the time. It's an issue that I actually write wills pretty frequently for foreigners who are living in Japan. And having a will is one of the keystones of being able to avoid the heavy duties applied by inheritance laws in Japan. But I wrote a piece on it. It hasn't been published yet, right, Maya? We haven't put it up on the webpage?
No, it is going out next week, actually,
Okay.
most probably on Tuesday. It will be on the webpage, and it will go out via the newsletter. So if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter yet, please let us know, or you can go to Substack and look up Langley Square there and subscribe for the newsletter.
So get off your duff and subscribe to the newsletter. It costs far less than the inheritance tax, for sure.
Right.
So that's my final comment, Maya. I'd like to wrap it up and go into the Q&A. The dock is beginning to get a little bit crowded. People are walking by looking at this strange person talking to himself on a boat that's tied to the dock. So let's go through the Q&A and then wrap this thing up so that I can get back onto the water.
Yes, let's do that. We'll start with the very first question that came in this morning, and it was posted by Byron.
That's not a surprise. Hi, Byron. Thank you very much for always joining us and always providing great comment.
Right, always. And now I'm getting there because for some reason the window I closed the window and now we'll get here. Okay.
He was asking about defense, right?
I guess so. Just a moment, please let me know. Okay, let me have a look at it. Are you ready to listen to the question, Timothy?
Yes,
Yes,
I
you
am.
are, as always. Okay,
Yes.
so the question is: U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Pentagon number 3 official,
Eldridge.
Eldridge Colby,
Yep.
reportedly urged Japan to define what role it would take in the event of a military conflict between the US and China over Taiwan. Has any such planning been done for such contingencies?
All the time, all the time. So you might remember when this issue first began to kind of take a little bit of heat, the Japanese said we will be in a support role if the United States gets involved. We won't be in conflict. We won't be in the line of fire, but we will support. We will have maybe transport or hospitals or um, logistics, but we're not going to be in the line of fire. And so the signed agreements that in the event of something like that happen, they have the dual responsibility. President Trump has criticized this. If anything happens to an ally, then you are supposed to go to their defense. You're supposed to go to their aid. And that's the same thing in NATO as well. With the United States and the SOFA agreement, the status of forces agreement between the United States and Japan, Japan is supposed to come to the United States aid, but it doesn't have any offensive capabilities. It's only got defensive capabilities because of its requirements under Article 9 of the Constitution. So I think from the United States perspective, thanks a lot. That doesn't help us. When we're being attacked, when the Chinese jets are coming in, what the hell are you going to do for us? And we've been doing this for you guys for 60 years and providing a nuclear umbrella, and you've been able to develop your industries and sell cars and focus on technologies without having to develop the weapons that we are providing for you. So that's kind of the bone of contention. So yes, there's always this planning. The United States and Japan, the Japanese are going for like underground bunkers for storage capabilities. They've developed a Marine force. Marines are typically, the guys that go in and take over the fortress, or they invade the island that has been taken over by the enemy. And the Marines are always the ones that suffer the most casualties because they are the brunt force. Even the Japanese are developing a Marine force and training with the Philippines, with the United States, with French paratroopers, with Australia too. So they're building this cadre of Marines, but you just can't compare it to the United States forces. So there's things that the Japanese can do easier, more effectively, as a contribution to that. But yes, those issues are being decided on an ongoing basis, maybe enhanced. I think right now the conversation is what the Prime Minister said this last week, and Mr. Rubio said, well, I guess that's okay if they want to focus on their own defenses and do their own thing. They're their own country. They shouldn't have to rely on us. And I think that's the philosophy of the United States now. America first. We're going to kind of bring things back home and do things our way. And our allies shouldn't rely on us. I mean, we've been the global policemen, and we're tired of it. We're tired of people taking advantage of us and paying U.S. tax dollars to support you, and you're not even contributing, and you don't thank us, and then you charge us for the cars and all of the products that we sell, and then you overcharge us for the medicine. Forget it. So there's this huge shift that's going on. And yes, it's a very critical time for Japan. What is Japan going to do? Are they going to change the Article 9 of the Constitution so they can have offensive weapons? That would cause a huge firestorm. But once again, I mean, we talk about this all the time, Maya. It's been 80 years. The Constitution was not quite written by the Japanese with the Japanese sensibilities. It was written by the victors, particularly Article 9, where Japan will never have offensive capabilities. They will never have the ability to threaten their regional neighbors ever again. And the Japanese Constitution is unique among all constitutions that it has not been amended, has not been touched, not a single iota, not a period has been changed since it was launched by the forces collected by General MacArthur, 70 years ago. So let's see what happens. I hope
Right.
that's somewhat responsive, Byron, but thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the answer. And Moving on to LinkedIn, I'm going to read the questions in chronological order, the order of receipt, or depending on the topic. Sometimes I'll group them, based on the topic. So the first one is question from, Rossi, I believe. The question is, what is the real reach of the nationalist message of Sansei-to? I see it being addressed in English media, for example,
Yeah,
YouTube, and many street interviews about foreign exhaustion seem to be proliferating in the last month.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, Timothy?
Yeah, that's true. And I think foreigners who live in Japan are a little bit oversensitive to that. I mean, if you've come into Japan, it's a high hurdle. The wall is high, but it's high even for the Japanese. The Japanese, they're born, they're raised Japanese. They get sent somewhere else to open a factory or to do trading for 5 or 6 years, and they bring their family with them. Their family comes back, and yes, those kids, those Japanese kids, have a hard time too. So it's a cultural thing, and it's part of the fabric of Japanese society. But I think the foreigners are, you know, a little bit less accustomed to that exclusionary. I mean, Maya, you've been here for 20 years, and most of the people on this program have been here for an extended period of time. You've gone through that. It is a part of your acclimation of getting, to be familiar and comfortable and useful here. But it does take time. It takes, a good 4 years before you can actually start to make a difference. And most of the time, the diplomats, career diplomats, they're here for 3 years and switched out. CEOs, high-powered CEOs for companies, they come in for maybe 3 or 4 years. The English and some of the European countries come for a longer period of time, but the Americans are usually come in, fix something, you're in and out in 3 years. It's hard for me to envision that you could be useful. I mean, it's such a hard place to wrap your head around. So, but there is a certain element within the Japanese, especially with the influx of foreigners and the over tourism and what's going on in Kyoto, and it's just unmistakable in Tokyo. So some people, they just don't like it. They kind of gives me the creeps. I see all of these people. I walked down the street and I saw this girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, and oh, where do those people come from, right? So there's just a tiny bit of that, but I think the opposition parties, the Sansei-to and some of these smaller groups, they're looking for those people they can resonate with, and picking on the foreigners always hits pay dirt. Even within the LDP, there are certain segments. The LDP is not completely, gung ho on bringing the foreigners in and let's do more of that. It's the LDP. It's a big party. Some of them are opposed to more foreigners coming in, and there was a discussion on them clamping down on the number of foreigners, and they get the driver's licenses so easy, and then they drive down the wrong side of the highway and they hurt people, and so it's really newsworthy, but I don't know how much cultural impact it has. But psychologically, yes, it does resonate. And in an election like this, people will talk about it. And yes, it'll probably make a bit of a difference. But I don't think overall, I think Japanese people are much more accommodating to foreigners coming in. And for fishing and for agriculture, if the foreign migrants weren't here, those industries would just simply collapse.
Yeah, I would say that's the same also in the construction industry. I can
Yeah.
see a lot of construction throughout the city, and many of the workers there are also of foreign origin. And Timothy, as you mentioned, I don't believe that all those people, the Japanese people who work with the foreigners and can see the benefits and feel the benefits of having workers from foreign countries, that they will actually vote for parties like Sansei-to. And another thing which I wanted to say about the LDP is that I think it was in 2021 maybe, or 2022, when I participated in a conference where at that time the vice minister for METI, he talked about immigration. And it is interesting because what he said was that the LDP and the government are very well aware of the necessity of importing foreign labor into Japan. Anyway, they have been actually silently promoting some policies to import foreign labor. But what he said was interesting. He said that they couldn't call that immigration, and they couldn't open the doors for everybody to come in openly because there were sensitivities actually in the general population. The general population is really apprehensive of having too many foreigners who are not aware of how they behave, how they
Yeah.
should behave here, right? Culturally and socially and everything. So that was a very interesting, very honest, actually, conversation by the minister back then. And also, one thing that I can mention is I have seen that these policies are actually being implemented, and even though they do not open the door to a vast amount or number of foreigners, they have still allowed a lot of foreigners to come in. And I could mention that, for example, there are people, Japanese educational institutions provide grants, and they could be also governmental grants, but they provide grants for people coming from East Asian countries and also some Western countries here too to study. And those students, once they graduate, they are allowed to look for a job here in Japan. And if they find a job, they're allowed to stay. This wasn't the case 10 years ago.
No,
So
they have
they
like a generous, like 6 months or so, maybe even a year, where they don't have to have a job, but they're looking for a job.
yes. And then there is also another policy, about specialized workers, which has been gradually increasing, it has helped increase the number of foreign workers here with specialized fields and everything. So this is happening, and because we are in Japan, everybody who has been here for a certain amount of time knows that in Japan everything happens very slowly, and it happens in the Japanese way. So basically, the government is opening the doors, but they are also creating a lot of filters for
Yeah.
the people who have, let's say, the ability to adjust to the Japanese society to stay. So I don't know. Maybe some people would say that would see it in a different way, like racist or this or that. But for me, I can see that basically the government is controlling, and they want to stay in control of immigration so that they can preserve the society the way it is.
Right.
Basically, in an orderly, they want to have this orderly society. They want it culturally cohesive. And I see that they're working in that direction as well. So it's not quick, it's not, in huge numbers, but these policies are here. And they don't talk about the policies
Yeah.
because there are sensitivities among the general population. This is just a commentary that I wanted to share because I have seen it, for the past couple of years. Yes, Timothy.
So it's not just me and you and other people who are in the audience who notice this and who are a little bit suspicious or fearful of it.
Mhm.
Governor of Tokyo Koike also made a comment on that, that this against foreigners and talking about foreigners is not particularly helpful. This is the governor of the largest metropolis in the world saying that. So it has hit the radar. It has come up, and these that sounds pejorative. These other smaller parties are grasping for people to vote for them, and I think with the population, the younger voters, the ones that are following social media, are a little bit more open to that kind of messaging. So yes, come Sunday, we'll know how they have voted and what issues they have kind of um, directed the way that they voted, and we can have a richer conversation. Not this next Sunday, because that will be voting day, but probably the Sunday after that. We can go into that in a bit more depth. But it's a great issue to talk about.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and we'll continue following it. Now, going back to Clubhouse, where we've got a question from Hiroko-san. She says, Prime Minister Ishiba strongly criticized Trump's tariffs during his campaign speech. Could this be an election strategy? Isn't there a risk of provoking Mr. Trump, which would result in ending up with even higher tariffs?
Yeah, I think the foreign ministry is very um, adept at dealing with this. They don't want to trigger a retaliatory reaction. Trump has wagged his finger even at Canada, 35%. And if you retaliate, it'll be double that. So I think people, they take the president at his word. They don't want to initiate retaliatory measures. But I think what this means from the United States with regard to Japan is you're holding a lot of U.S. debt. So don't try and kind of, dump your debt. That would cause great harm to the United States as a retaliatory measure because you've got to pay 25%. But I think there are other ways that Japan can react to this new set of circumstances, and I think they will. And it's a turning point. It's a hinge moment for Japan. I think the Japan that we're moving into as a consequence of the Trump tariffs and however that's going to be resolved, I think it's going to stick actually. And I think Japan is going to adroitly address that. And it might mean that they become closer to China, that the Chinese market, it becomes a little bit more of a consumer, or maybe even India, but yeah, maybe not. I mean, the United States is the cat's meow. It's got all the consumers there. It's a wealthy country, and it sucks in products that Japan loves to build. So it's a tough issue, and I think the Prime Minister and the President of the United States have honed in on that. It's a delicate issue. There's not really much you can do about it. So you maybe pay up and shut up, because any other option is going to cost you far more than that. And you've been having a free ride anyway. So stop crying and let's get back to business, I guess.
Right. And we've got a comment about this actually from Frederick Gundlach. So he says, I think the Trump administration is really not doing very well here in these negotiations. Japanese products are just better, and that's why there is a trade deficit. Japan buys treasuries to finance the trade. GPIF holds a ton of treasuries. Yes, well, I would agree with you, privately and of course here as well, because we have talked about this, and this has been an issue for more than 20 years now, starting with the American automobiles, why they don't
Yeah.
sell here in Japan. And back then, there were theories that there was protectionism and there was this and that. And at the end of the day, they just didn't tickle the Japanese aesthetic, sense of aesthetics and Japanese sense of, let's say, practicality, because they were too big. They were just gasoline guzzlers. They were, anything, they were not good enough for the Japanese market. And
Right.
we're back there. We are talking about the same thing that people realized was true 20 years ago, which is kind of strange, because for 20 years or even more than that, we think that people would have realized, the government workers would have realized what the real issue is, and
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, Maya, you've been here for quite a while, and there has been no period in time previous to this where there's been so much change and so much dynamic structural. I mean, during the Clinton years, there was issues there, and even before that, the senators bashing the Toyotas on the Capitol Hill steps. There has been this fluctuation up and down in this U.S.-Japan relationship, but this one here is really deep, and I think it's meaningful, and I think the relationship between the two countries is going to change as a result. And Frederick, thank you very much for your insight. Frederick is a tax specialist, so he knows U.S.-Japan taxes. He does taxes for people and for companies, and he has got a great bead on this issue. So thanks for commenting.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. And okay, we've got something kind of. No, it is a question about transparency and information, how information is presented here in Japan. And it is once again from Rossi Lamont Walter. So he says, just let me get to that question again, because we've got quite a few here. Okay. Who is holding upper house candidates responsible for how they present information?
Yeah.
Is it not fear-mongering?
Yeah.
Who is going to tell Japanese politicians that the events in Los Angeles were not provoked by violence and looting by undocumented immigrants, as they seem to be simply in the Sangin Senkyo Annai that I received this week. The misinformation at this level is concerning. I'm used to it from American politician, but at least I can be confident that more accurate information should be presented. Yes.
So first and foremost, thanks for the question. First and foremost, it's the opposition candidate. So if you're running an election and you're speaking to the constituency, or you're standing on top of the campaign car and you've got 6 microphones and you're commenting on this, and you're being very expansive about your comments on what needs to be changed and why it needs to be done and why people need to vote for you, it's your opposition candidate. It's the other person who's speaking 500 yards away in front of a station with another 6 microphones stuffed in his hand. So that's the first line of defense. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's kind of discoloring the conversation. That's the first place. But the second place is the Japanese press is going to point that out, and they're going to hold distinctions of how the candidates rack up in terms of likability, credibility, what they're saying, how they resonate, or how their message resonates. And there'll be comments on that. And then there are other, in the third line, there are people like Michael Chuchek or Tobias or even you in the audience, or us, who makes comments like that and tells people, the way this is being portrayed or characterized is not accurate. People generally will get the basic gist of it, but people believe what they want to believe. And if you say something that resonates to them, even if it's untrue, it turns out that people prefer to believe that. So that's why elections are so hard, and it's so delicate, because you can say things, people are going to, in the moment, believe it and vote accordingly, but they don't fact check it, or people don't fact check it in time. I mean, I think that was one of the great criticisms of the Biden administration. They put out these talking points and this fake news, and people didn't cross-check it until later, and by then the story was already out and it was amplified and that sort of thing. So it's a dastardly way of doing business, but it's politics.
It is politics, yes, indeed. Yes, and we've got also another comment from Rossi. And then he says, the period of legal residence granted between graduation and employment feels very generous in Japan. I agree. Yeah. And it is very encouraging as an option. And I think that the observation of the need to preserve order of the country is spot on, and a more representative view than is sentiment against international residents. Yes. Well, that's basically, yeah.
You're living it, right?
You're living it, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've got one question from Patricia. Patricia, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And the question is about, yes, where can I find out more about the will and avoiding inheritance tax payments to the J government? Well, Patricia, we're going to publish this next week. It will go via the newsletter of Langley Esquire, and it will be also published on the website of Langley Esquire. So if you have subscribed for the newsletter, you're going to receive it directly into your email box. Or if you haven't yet, let me know and I'll add your name to the mailing list.
Right. So just a brief preview for your, because you've asked the question. One of the critical things is, do you have a will or you don't have a will? So if you don't have a will, most people don't have a will when they die, because of course nobody actually believes they're going to die. So they never sit down and write a will. It's a bit of a pain in the neck. It costs some money. You have to talk to somebody about really personal issues. And it's not a pleasant exercise to go through. But you write one will and you put it away, and then things are done. If you don't write a will, 90% of the people don't write a will. And when you don't write a will, then the state steps in and they say, since you died and you didn't leave a will, we have a recipe for how your estate is going to be handled. So are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have any illegitimate kids? What is, how is your estate? How are your assets calibrated? Is it property? Is it Japanese property? Is it art in Paris? Is it currency? Is it gold bars? Is it stocks and bonds? And the Japanese government has their own recipe for doing that. You can sidestep that by having a will, but the will has to satisfy certain requirements. So that's the short story. Please keep a lookout for the article, which will go into a little bit more detail. But thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, I will add you to the mailing list, Patricia. Thank you very much for that. And from Manabe-san, we have a question about the two tankers that were sunk in the Red Sea, I think.
Yes.
So what do you think the impact on Japan will be? Probably on politics, economy, and so on.
So who is this from?
From Manabe-san.
Manabe-san, you always get great questions. So apparently the Houthis were defeated. They were bombed. They submitted. They said they weren't going to do it again. And then the Trump administration and the Israelis went after Iran, who are the sponsors of the Houthis. And we thought that was done. But I think the Iranians are saying, ha, we're coming back. We're not doing what you want us to do. And the Houthis came back, and in a big way. So I'm not too attuned to that particular issue. I know that two of them were sunk. I also know that twice this week, Chinese jets flew close to Self-Defense Forces surveillance plane that was in international waters in the region, in the South Pacific region. They came within 30 meters of the pilot's cockpit. So that's very close in a fighter jet. A bigger surveillance plane was buzzed by on two occasions this last week. It happened last week. I reported on it last week as well. One incident. This week it was two incidents in the morning, in the early morning during the surveillance flight. So, all you need is a small mistake like that. If one Japanese soldier, a self-defense forces officer, or even a conscript was killed or injured, that would be a huge issue. You would immediately see a constitutional issue being brought up about Article 9. So it's not good, these cat and mouse games, and it's a very delicate issue. It was reported that President Trump said on a hot mic that he was talking with President Xi, and he told him, if you moved on Taiwan, I will bomb Beijing. And President Xi said, you're kidding, right? I mean, that's outlandish. And the president said, no, definitely I would do that. So the tension there is very real. It is palatable. It is live. And I think the questions that we got earlier, what is Japanese true obligation should something like that happen? How much can the United States rely on them? What are their obligations, and what resources do they have to put at that? And speaking of the resources, we've gone into this many times here, that Japanese airports, commercial airports in Narita, in Haneda, they are now open to take flights and perform service and maintenance for military aircraft from the United States, and probably from other allied forces as well. So if it really becomes kinetic, I mean, Japan will become the battleship, the staging area. It's not just going to be Okinawa. I mean, all of the airports have been included in that set of agreements that was signed, I think maybe 3 or 4 months ago. But yes, there's preparation for full engagement. So I think that the message here to China is, don't even think about it. We are gearing up for it. The Australians are in on it, the New Zealanders, the Canadians, the French, the British, everybody's here. We've got battleships that are there. We're cross-training. We're doing it with drones. We're doing it with a lot of things. Don't think about it. So very delicate issue.
It is indeed, yes. And well, we can talk about a different time again and go a little bit deeper. And for the moment, it looks like we have gone through the comments and questions. If I have missed one of your comments or two of them, please forgive me for this. You can write to me, DM me on LinkedIn and say, okay, next time I want this comment to be, fed to Timothy. So, and I'll do that. So thank you very much to everybody who stayed with us. And it was a pleasure to have you on this beautiful Sunday morning again, or probably Saturday evening, depending on where you are. We'll be here once again next Saturday. Thankfully, today we didn't experience any technical issues. Once again, I apologize for what happened last week.
Last week was terrible.
It was
Sorry
really,
about that.
yes. I'm very sorry for this, but hopefully we'll be able to go without technical issues from now on. And Timothy, just one last word for before we close the live stream.
Yes. As soon as we finish, I'm going to take this off and I'm going to put on my fundoshi and I'm going to hoist the sails and I'm going to head back to Chiba. It's about maybe a 2.5 or a 3 hour sail. The wind is not very strong today, but I have to cross at a 90-degree angle the shipping lane. And there are all sorts of container ships and tankers and submarines and destroyers crossing through there. So when I cross over, I have to kind of weave and bob, and it's a
Please,
very exciting time.
forgive me for repeating myself, but do not sink any of those plays while crossing that channel. Yes.
Well,
All right.
I appreciate everybody tuning in because it's, we do this every Sunday and everybody's got a life. You got a life, Maya. You're doing the broadcast from your home. So at least we can see your daughter sneaking in from time to time. But for me, I'm almost always out on the water. And so it's a little bit more difficult. And that's why we had the technical issue, because I've got the studio here inside, maybe inside the cabin of the boat, the good ship Grimm's, or more likely on the deck. But yes, we have to be careful with overheating of the equipment and Wi-Fi and that sort of thing. But having this briefing doesn't stop us from living, the regular life that we have. It's just that, I have to get prepared and put on some makeup and wear a jacket and then have this briefing for you. But I enjoy doing it. Maya would kill me if I didn't show up. So it's a method of preservation.
Indeed. Okay, thank you for recognizing that. And once again, well, have a great Sunday and a productive new week. And we'll be here once again next time. So we're looking forward to seeing you with us again. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
See you next weekend for the election voting day.
Right.
Briefing.